Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Planning Committee meeting. Do you want to take roll, Diane?
People here in the public are not used to this.
Commissioners present, David Durant. Commissioner Mitchoff.
Here.
Commissioner Romick.
Here.
Chair Abelson.
Here. And there's one absent, but he's across the way.
Still eating.
Eating, probably.
I didn't say that for the record, though.
Neither. I think I didn't either. Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items not on the agenda. I will ask for the record, are there any? Seeing none, I will go on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Okay. Okay, and that's of May 6th. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Passed unanimously, and let it be noted that, that what? That Dave Hudson is here, so we now have all members present and accounted for. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Okay, there's a motion and approval. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition, any abstention? Motion carries unanimously, which takes us to item number 12. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning. And this item is asking that you review and approve a detailed countywide transportation work plan that will support development of a transportation expenditure plan and follow the schedule that was approved by the board at its May meeting. We're at the point now where we've worked up a schedule and a work plan for you to review, and that is assuming that the authority is going to adopt a transportation expenditure plan, and that's tentative, of course, in May 2016. What we're trying to do at this point is align the countywide transportation plan effort with the transportation expenditure plan effort. As you know, we had planned to adopt the CTP, the 2014 CTP, back in March, and it was queued up for final approval. That approval was postponed. And we, at the same time, got approval from the authority to start working on this transportation expenditure plan, which would be an increase of the half-cent sales tax and a possible extension. In 2004, when we did the Measure J sales tax extension, the authority decided that they would have the countywide transportation plan look at different expenditure plan options. And so what we're proposing to do here is start to develop some financially constrained transportation investment options and evaluate them over the next few months, and hopefully by August have some options that we can evaluate in a subsequent environmental impact report. We have two consultants working on this project. One is Diet and Bhatia. They're our on-call planning consultant. And the other is Lamphere Gregory. They worked on the environmental report. So both consultants have expended their CTP budget in the past year working on getting to the final for last March. If you approve this work plan, there are consultant amendments that follow in the next two items, 13.1 and 13.2, and those would give us the financing to do what we're proposing to do. If you take a look at the schedule on page 12.5, we previously released the draft countywide plan in August 2014. The revised schedule would be to reissue the draft in January 2016, and that draft would include the alternative transportation investment options. So we're postponing that. At the same time, in January 2016, we would release the draft subsequent environmental impact report. The previous schedule was to adopt the countywide plan in March 2015. Our new schedule would be to adopt it in May 2016. That would be when the authority certifies the final SEIR, adopts the final countywide plan, and then if we go forward with a TEP, adopts the transportation expenditure plan. And then we go from there to having the county put it on the ballot. We think this is a very logical and reasonable approach. We probably need to come up with a new brand name for the 2014 CTP, since we'll be adopting it in 2016. And we can either change the date or change the name. But we're asking for your approval at this time of the proposed work plan.
Is there any discussion?
And Madam Chair, I should also mention there is an issue with concerning which CTP guidelines we should follow. And for this first effort, we followed MTC's guidelines that were developed back in 2000. Their new guidelines were adopted last fall, 2014. They don't apply to any CTP that was started earlier than, I think, November 2014. This was started way earlier before that. But since we are looking now at a May 2016 adoption date, you should consider using MTC's more recent guidelines. They're a little more complex. They have more requirements, but we think we could meet those guidelines. So that's something we need to talk about either tonight or at the authority meeting. If you'd like, we can work it into the board letter so that it's further flushed out for you.
Is there a preference?
I don't have a problem with the work plan schedule, but the question I have, and perhaps it isn't answered tonight, but I think it needs to be part of the conversation as we move forward, is with the governor's announcement last week that he wants to seek an increase in the gas tax. How does that impact this? Because I'm concerned that the public is going to see that if that moves through, why do they need to do this? As I said, I'm not sure that we need an answer tonight, but I think at some point along the way, we're going to need to answer that question before this goes out. Before we get along too much farther, we'll need to have thought of that and analyze that if it's going to happen. If so, how much is he looking to raise it? How much money would that generate? What would those dollars be able to be used for that are either the same as what this an increase could be, or are they supplemental or different?
Supervisor Mitchoff, we'll address that in our update of our legislative program. SB 16 is, I think, the bill you're referring to, where it, on a short-term basis, raises the excise tax on gasoline in California. And we can lay out the proposal. This is also an issue that we brought up earlier with a crowded ballot. And so how does that affect our moving forward? And we're not going to move forward if the polling numbers don't show that it's gonna pass. And so, we're going to do all those steps that we need to do to make sure you feel comfortable as a board, so that you have all the information before you take that vote early next year.
Thank you. And your attention is much more focused. I was just sort of surprised because everything I've ever heard is nobody will touch it. It's the third rail of taxes, and we're just not going there. And I was surprised when I read that. I'm sure you're keyed into it much more, but it was the first time I had heard it, so I was sort of surprised by it because I just didn't think it was on the to-do list. He's doing tunnels and fast-track train and everything. I just didn't think he was going to touch that, so thank you.
He's looking for that third strike.
So, so bringing us back to item 12.1, or 12, the approval of the revised work plan. Are there any other comments?
I have a question.
Okay, Kevin?
What would be the repercussions, if any, of not following the current guidelines of staying where we were with older ones? As you brought up this evening, the different standards, are there issues involved with staying with the old and not going with the new? As Martin mentioned, the new ones tend to be a little bit more convoluted, complicated.
I can reply to that. Commissioner Romick, Martin Engelman again. The initial guidelines from MTC are fairly permissive, the ones that were adopted in 2000, and they focus quite a bit on countywide plans and what congestion management agencies do. The new guidelines adopted last November really make the countywide plan look more like a regional transportation plan, and we need to bring in more of the sustainable community strategy, more of the adopted Plan Bay area. So there are two sides to the coin. Those who like Plan Bay area and the SCS and embrace it would welcome our having guidelines, using guidelines that bring us closer to that. Those who don't like it would want us to use the older guidelines. Technically, we're completely, I think, legal using the old guidelines because we initiated this process prior to 2014. We actually initiated it in 2013. But to say that in May 2016 that the old guidelines still apply, I think that's going to be a fairly weak argument when we have the tools and the resources to fully address, we believe we can fully address the new guidelines. And it would be kind of a good faith action on our part to step up to the new guidelines and fulfill the requirements.
So this would be more of a political answer as opposed to just a straight yes or no on it. We have to look at who we may offend and who we may not offend, and who we're going to look to support us in our projects as we go forward, and who may be less inclined to support us in deciding on what standard we choose to go with in the future.
Commissioners, I don't think it's a political answer. I think it's a question of, as we read the different responses to our plan, what do we need to do to put us in the best position to make sure that we have done our adequate due diligence as far as the studies of the ultimate projects that go into the expenditure plan? Because one of the questions was, do you have a prioritized list? And the answer is we don't need a prioritized list. That's not required by law. And one of the other questions was, what do you benchmark your projects against? And so I think that the decision ultimately will be how much, and MTC has agreed to help us with some of the different studies that we don't have the expertise to do. So if we're going to add more time to do the analysis, then our internal discussions are, is it worth the extra effort? You're going to have to do this the next time anyway. And the question would be, because we started early, do we use the old standards or the new standards? I think what's happening today is, at this point in time, we're leaning more toward, we're going to do this extra work. If MTC is willing to use their models and their modelers to help us get through this process, it might be a good decision to do that, to provide the cover.
If I could just add to that, Madam Chair.
Please.
It's not as simple as it appears, and I think it'd be good to actually bring the two sets of guidelines before you and tell you what the differences are. And we could do that in July. We have some time. I mean, we don't have to decide today. It'd be a little rush to do that for the June authority meeting. But I mean, if you'd like, we could, for the July meeting, we could bring this back to you and have a write-up
How
to
does-
show you the differences, or if you're ready to roll, we could take it to the authority this month.
Why don't you just bring it
I'm ready to roll right now, to tell you the truth.
But have that at the authority.
Yeah, if somebody wants it, but, I mean, I would move the plan using 2016 because the reality check is exactly what you're saying. You're going to have to do it anyway. And the comprehensive transportation plan does somehow go through MTC. And they have a funny way of looking at things that just doesn't always match up with everybody else. And if you could do it within the time frame, do it. I mean, if you're saying that, well, wait a minute, this is going to end up being quadruple the work and we really don't need to do it. I don't think you really know whether or not you need to do it until it gets in front of when you find out, you know what, you should do this little bit extra. But if, Martin, I'm kind of reading body language too. Maybe it is worth taking a look at. I personally think you should do the 2016 and get it over with because you got a couple members on MTC on this board, and they're going to say that. I'm pretty sure she will.
I think we've heard two opinions. What about the others here?
May I? Okay. Thank you. So, how do I say this? It strikes me as sort of interesting. It feels like the staff recommendation is to actually do the 2016 because you think at the end of the day it will result in a better product that is more defensible. Is that a fair way to state it?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. That for me, that's good enough because at the end of the day on this one, I think we probably want to put forward a product that is less subject to attack. We're going to get people questioning and concerned about a whole bunch of stuff as we go through a process. I'd rather not be mired down in a long and extended conversation about old requirements versus new requirements, even if we're legally defensible using the old requirements. And I think at the end of the day, if we use the new requirements, since we're trying to, I'll say, appropriately position ourselves as a forward-looking agency that's trying to do the right thing for the future, better to use the future guidelines, even if they're not, technically the legally required ones at this point. So I'm perfectly happy with that approach.
Okay, Kevin?
I can support that also. I think we should obviously be looking for ways to limit our battles into the future.
And I agree with that. So I think, okay. Okay. Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition or abstentions?
No opposition, but there was another point that Karen brought up. If you can bring to the full board meeting what the difference would be, it may help. And that's kind of what we're doing here is how to position it to get it through the whole board. But the thing I didn't bring up is there's not going to be any RENA numbers to deal with this time. The CTP is pretty much going to be it when they start fooling around with One Bay Area review and upgrade or update or whatever we're going to call it. So we might as well just be, out front, up front. And
So we were voting. I think we can just.
Oh, I thought we did.
we-
I'm sorry.
Okay, so it will go then to, when was it coming back here then? Because you were suggesting that it wasn't.
Well, Madam Chair, the direction I heard is you would like for staff to bring this item to the authority at the June meeting, and we will include your recommendation that we go to the newer guidelines, and we'll also attach the new guidelines, and we'll write something up about what the differences are between the new and the old. And then they can make a
Is that
final
okay
decision.
with everyone? Yes. Okay, great. Then I think we are done with that item. Okay, so with that, we will move to the next item, which is item number 13. 13.1 is approval of amendment number 2 to consultant agreement number 324 with Diet and Badia for completion of the 2014 CTP and continued ongoing planning-related consultant services for Contra Costa's congestion management and growth management programs. Sir, report?
And Madam Chair, staff requests that you take 3.1 and 3.2 together.
Okay,
Would that be okay? Mm-hmm. So essentially, these two items are increasing the consultant budget so that we can carry forward with basically doing the plan over again, starting with the last draft and redoing it. So you have a scope of work from Diet and Bhatia in your packet, and the estimated cost for Diet and Bhatia to do the new plan is an additional $200,000. They previously had a budget of $238,000, and that is almost fully expended. So their total revised budget would be $438,767. Lanphier Gregory fully expended the $250,000 they had to do the supplemental EIR. We're essentially starting over with a subsequent EIR now that will involve several more alternatives than the previous EIR, and again extending the schedule 14 months. So Lanphier Gregory, the cost for their amendment is they're asking $300,000, which includes a contingency for a total budget of $550,000, and we're asking that you approve these funds, approve these contract amendments. The funding for this comes from federal government surface transportation program funds, and we think that we can get 88% federal, and then there's a local match which we can also provide, and the funding for this is included in the proposed budget for next year.
Any comments?
Move approval for both 13.1 and 13.2.
Okay, was there a second there? Okay, so motion by Romick, second by Hudson, and all in favor, and there's no audience members present. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously.
We're holding our nose over on this side.
Okay. Let it be known. Okay, with that, we move on to item number 14, which is a report on the Safe Routes to School technical assistance. Peter, is that you?
No, it is me.
It is you, excuse me.
Good evening, Chair Abelson and Commissioners. One part of the scope of work for the Safe Routes to School needs assessment project was to provide technical assistance to cities and schools throughout the county. We set aside $120,000 to do that. We sent out a letter to the RTPCs asking for projects, gave them a number based on the school enrollment in the different areas, and they came up with assistance to 23 schools, 17 projects, 14 sponsors. The consultants have begun work as of today. They've completed the site visits with at all the schools. They've said they've had a lot of cooperation and involvement from city staff and from school personnel as well, especially the principals. They're putting together a schedule and a list of the deliverables, which they'll be sending out to the staff. And by the end of this year, all of the technical assistance should be provided. Some of the projects will take a little bit more time than others. Some should be pretty straightforward. They run the gamut from access plans at particular schools or walk and roll to school maps, some conceptual plans for specific improvements. So there's a fairly wide range within that, the subject area of Safe Routes to School. So if you have any questions, you can, I'll be
Any
happy
questions?
to try to answer them. And we'll be bringing back a report once all the technical assistance has been
I have
provided.
one question. I don't know about anywhere else, but in my school district, this is the last week of school. So there won't be a lot of staff around at schools to talk to. Is that going to impact anything?
Well, all the talking to the schools has been done.
Okay,
It was done at the end of last week.
okay,
So it was all done before school is out. It's the consultants' work now that's going on, and they'll be doing that through the summer. Sorry.
okay. Anything else? Okay, this is an information item.
Yes.
So if there are no comments or questions, We are done with that item, and we're ready for other business. I don't think there is any. Do you have one?
Yeah, yes, I do,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is report on our first expenditure plan advisory committee meeting. We hosted it today started at 10 o'clock at the Embassy Suites here right across the patio. And we had a large number of participants representing the various areas that we had decided upon. Some folks didn't show up, but I can give you a real quick kind of a synopsis of who did show up. Bay Area Council, Mike Cunningham, Bike East Bay, Dave Campbell, Building and Construction Trade Council, Bob Lilly, Lisa Vorderbergen, BIA, California Alliance for Job, Andy Fields. Somebody from the Labor Council was there as well. I don't recall. I think it was Cheryl Brown. Cheryl Brown, okay. And then Contra Costa Community College District, Tim Leong was there. Jack Weir represented the Taxpayers Association. We had Bruce Burns was from the Contra Costa County Office of Education. We had Dennis Freeman was there from the East Bay Economic Development Alliance. Kristen Conley showed up and represented East Bay Leadership Council. Sean Dugan was there from East Bay Regional Park District. Genesis was represented by Mary Lim Lampy. Greenbelt Alliance was there. Para Transit Coordinating Council was represented. Rehab Services of Northern California, Save Mount Diablo Transform. So everybody showed up. The point was we need a representative from agriculture and may want to consider a representative from goods movement industry. So everybody was there. We went through our presentations. We had some questions. I think Martin's area, his presentation had a number of questions about various components to the CTP and how it relates to the transportation expenditure plan. Overall, I think it was a great meeting. I think there was a lot of excitement in the room, and so we're waiting for a meeting number 2. But I think it was, and it's going to be online, and the packets like this are available for you in the same place that you get your packets for the board meetings. And you're all signed up to get this information. So if you're interested, take a look and let us know how we're doing. Thank you.
How is the decision being made on the goods movement staff person? Is that coming from the county or from you guys?
No decision has been made. What was mentioned was somebody from the industry should be nominated. There was no decision on who makes that decision. Or Eric Seithel,
Rich Seithel
Rich Seithel was there as well from Northern Waterfront. Sorry, he was actually sitting at the dais as well.
So I guess my question, so is that going to be resolved by the time the group really gets going?
I hope so.
Okay, so who's going to resolve it?
They just brought it up, so we'll take it up with the consulting team. We'll try to figure out.
Okay, that's what I was just trying to
Yeah,
figure out.
there's no
process.
decision made. That was just a point of discussion that, goods movement is a big issue, and who's going to represent the industry.
So you're going to be talking with the consultant relative to process on
Yes.
how that person gets identified?
Right.
All right, thank you.
Is there a industry organization in our county for goods movement?
Well, I brought this up with my colleague after our last meeting because I saw the categories, and I thought that the Northern Waterfront, or at least goods movement, should be represented. So I know there's been discussions back and forth with county staff and CCTA staff, and so I was just following up on the comment
Well,
that Randy made.
I used to be on the MTC Advisory Council, and when I sat next to the person representing the goods and movement industry. But they were representing the industry. I mean, there was like an industry group that they represented.
Well, the
and
reason-
actually, I personally found them really helpful as a participant in the group, and I learned a lot from having that person on the group that I wouldn't have learned any other way. And so I actually would very much support having that person, but I would hope that it would be from the industry if there is such a thing.
First thought that came to my mind was the California Trucking Association. Eric Sauer is a good friend of mine, and he's the government relations person for the trucking industry. We can probably get somebody from the Port of Oakland to participate if we're looking at ports. So there's a number of opportunities. I think we got to just figure out who that person or persons are that represents goods movement.
If there's a way to keep the person Contra Costa I'd do it. The port just seems to be, they get all the money from the air district anyway. We went through that issue. Remember when I told you Haggerty, if there's any way that a CTA would be great for me. The one that concerns me the most is agriculture. For some reason at the regional level, every time it comes up, agriculture is in every working group on all the legislation that comes up. But when it goes to get an ag person, the last time we did it at the air district, it went to a land trust attorney. And I'm going, oh, wait a minute, that's not really ag. It's supposed to be hands in the ground. And she quit after 2 years. It usually went to northern counties. It was kind of like understood it was one of their reps, Napa, Sonoma, whatever. So it might be difficult. If I could implore our East County representative people between Taylor and Romick to say, do we have anybody out there that'll show up at the meetings and participate? Because we're losing them. They're not participating in decisions and discussions. And there's enough people here that there should be somebody in that board.
Anything else?
You try checking with the Farm Bureau and see if they have anybody from the Farm Bureau board or something else that would be willing to participate. Yeah, something like that. So. Now kids. In terms of good movements, I think goods movements, there's sort of two different constituencies there to think about, right? One is the folks whose goods are being moved, so that may or may not be represented by the agricultural folks. But there's a lot of stuff that comes in from the airports that gets trucked around, things like that, not just the ports. But so I'd be looking at two segments there. One is the folks whose goods are being moved because they're ultimately the ones who are paying for the service and living with the delays and things like that. And then also the transportation, if you will, companies, the transport companies, the ones who are actually moving the goods physically, might be useful to go and reach out and see who because they're the ones using the roads and all that sort of stuff. So it might be good to get both angles. Just a thought.
It's a good point. We could probably talk to Amazon or FedEx or somebody like that and who know more about how to move their vehicles on our system than probably most DOTs.
That's exactly where I was headed. Yeah.
But the TFCA fund, the monthly list we have at the Air District, is just loaded with these truckers, independent trucks that are getting new engines or new trucks or whatever. We've been fighting to get Contra Costa to use more. I was surprised to find out at the port, the second besides Alameda, largest county was Contra Costa use. It's only by one truck, but I mean, somebody just needs to be there if something looks different or, sometimes you go to 5 meetings, you find one thing.
So if I didn't quite catch, I heard you say West County, but what's the numbers just off by one? What?
No, Contra Costa County, the whole county.
Oh, I thought you said West County. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I might have a little sleep deprivation. Cruise. Europe.
Darn it.
Hey, I got stuck out on the tarmac for 3 hours. They canceled my flight.
So do you have
I
enough
missed a golf
information,
tournament.
Randy?
Pity party,
To
table
follow
of
up
one,
on
your table's ready.
the goods movement?
Yep, I took notes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the input.
Okay, great. So why don't we move on? And all that is left is news clippings and correspondence. Anything to report on? I don't think we had anything listed in our packet.
Let's see pictures.
Nope. Okay, with that, we're adjourned till July 1st. Thank you all for coming.